Hi, and welcome to the School Leadership Show. I am Jen David Lang, and this is very sad, but my co-host, Mike Dowdy, was not able to join us. My better half, I might say, see if he's listening. But I am very fortunate that I get to interview the authors and Masbach and Kim Morrison about their new 2023 book, Differentiated Supervision, Growing Teachers and Getting Results, published by Corwin Press. So I am very honored to be here with the two of you today. Welcome.
Thank you. We're happy to be here.
So glad. So why don't we, as always, start with you and your book, but what are your roles in the field of education and what led you to write this book? Whoever wants to go first.
Well, Kim and I worked together for many years when Kim was a principal, still is, she can talk about that. And I was a central office type, so don't hold that against me. So we worked together for many years. I was in K-12 education for 25, 30 years in leadership positions for the last 20. And now I'm a professor in a college leading an ed leadership program.
And I've been in educational leadership, specifically being a principal, for 24 years.
Long time.
And I've also done quite a bit of work with, district leadership and new teacher development, and did some statewide work around educational leadership and development, supervision and those kinds of things as well. So, but predominantly I'm a principal and love being that.
That's great. Well, that's fantastic. So, well, our audience is elementary. Say it again. Oh, Kim is.
And she's in both elementary and middle. So I think that's nice. It gives us a wide lens on what she does.
Anyway. We cover a lot. That's great. Well, good. Well, the audience is mostly school and district leaders. So you both fit the bill. So tell our listeners, where did the ideas for differentiated supervision come from, and why this book?
I'll start with the title a little bit. First of all, it's come from a lot of trial and error and practice, for sure. The term differentiated supervision was first put in front of me by my mentor, whose name is Nancy Mooney. And I had the great privilege, Nancy's no longer with us, but we wrote a book together called Align the Design by AACD back in 2008. Both of us were district leaders trying to figure out, what is it that helps lead a school and a district and a system, to higher levels of achievement. And she gave me this notion of differentiated supervision. And I think it took me the next 10 years to figure out what that meant. And with the help of, a lot of, like I said, research, but beginning to look at supervision as more than just evaluation and connecting it to school improvement. So that's kind of where we started, knowing that it needs to be a part of your overall school improvement efforts and connecting it to that. One of the biggest things that we talk about a lot in the book, as you know, is that, it's alignment and it's a system. And we love, and whenever we do our consulting work, we always use that kind of the garden and growth and harvest, because we want people to picture how, you pull a weed and it changes the plant, it changes the dirt around the plant. And we had for so long treated things in schools so in such silos, and we believe and we knew that supervision was really such an important piece, and principals spend so much time on it for little return. Right. So we started thinking about how do we get to be more efficient, more effective, and really have impact.
Yeah, and I think the idea for the book, and humbly, both of us have had a lot of success in turning schools around. I've, turned 4 around pretty dramatically, and Anne has been my mentor and my boss both. And so we took the ideas around school improvement and then really slowed down our thinking and got really metacognitive about what is it that's getting the impact? What is it that we need to be doing? And really the book was born out of authentic work of what what has worked and created, turnaround schools, and also like great work with teachers and their good achievement results. So it's about impact. And we know, we both really believe that every child deserves a great teacher, and they are the most impactful element in a child's life. So our job is to care and nurture them. And to do that, we felt like we needed to put this out. So
I love that, that you're aiming to connect the supervision process more to school improvement, and also just that you've had the tremendous success to show that it is possible. I mean, what drew me to the model that you describe in this book, and we'll get there, is that you have really expanded what it means to supervise teachers. You started with the goal of, we need to improve our school, so we need to expand our idea. And you mentioned, beyond just the evaluation process that we know happens at the end, but even at this day and stage, when I go into most schools, I still see one supervisory practice. In addition to that end of year, I just see principals observing teachers one-on-one and giving feedback, either a sticky note, an email, or even if it's face-to-face, even if they get into 10 classes a week, 20 a week, and they get that one-to-one feedback, that's only one type. And you've really expanded it beyond that. So I'm wondering if you can speak to what was the problem with the past supervisory practices that led you to this book? What was the problem as you saw it?
First and foremost, no impact. It was such a charade for everybody. And even when we added the walkthroughs, so I was super excited. My mentor, Nancy, who I mentioned earlier, oh my gosh, these walkthroughs are going to be great. They're going to be perfect. They're more authentic. And they have become, such a exercise in futility, because it's very prescribed. It's very, checklisty. We talk about that in the book. And, okay, so you're in the classroom more, but again, is it making any difference? And is it having any impact? And when principals can't see the connection, between all these things, and it was treated as this activity. Oh, I've got to do, the district said I've got to get into 5 classrooms this week, or I've got to get, so you rush through and you do that. And without the contemplation, without the reflection, without the continuous feedback loop in different, in more than one way. We talk a lot about, what we know, what happens in classrooms for those effective teachers. They teach in more than one modality, right? I mean, they're doing small group, they're doing whole group, they're talking one-on-one, they're giving feedback. And we have to do that as leaders. It's really hard though, because it's complex, which is why we tried to set it up in a way that helps you kind of see those connections, and you can do it.
Yeah. And I guess the other part of the problem is just, teachers' belief and feeling of those old practices, and whether or not they're finding what you're telling them relevant, authentic, knowledgeable, actionable. And when they are part and they have collaborative agency into the differentiated supervision model, because they're integral in that. There's a couple things that happen. Number one, yes, you're getting impact because you're able to articulate collaboratively together what is going to impact their classroom and their practices and what's going to make a difference. But, you reviewed a book, something called The Joy of Teaching, or Putting the Joy in Teaching. And teachers have what we think is an intended but offshoot of a better culture. They have a better relationship with your principal because they have more trust, they have more relevance, it's more consistent because they see you more often. They aren't as intimidated by you because you're more of a coach in this model and less of an evaluator. Yes, you're their evaluator. We always have that hat, but we have the luxury of wearing several hats: the professional developer, the coach, the friend, the co-learner. And so we've tried to articulate that in this model and really solve that problem of teacher satisfaction.
Yeah. And one more thing, we spent so much time, especially as a central office person, I spent a lot of time at, these teachers are resisting. They're not resisting. We're doing it to them. We don't let them own it. And I'm like, is it resistance, or is it because we haven't put, that infrastructure of support in place, because we haven't let them in and put the veil down and let them see what's behind here, And so I think I mean, and that's one of those things, you know, you wish you had a do-over in your career. I wish I could have done that over instead of like spending all this time and, oh, how do we do a better job in PD to convince them that this is the right thing instead of working alongside of them. And Vivian Robinson's work really influenced us there. And do it with them instead of to them. And so we waste all this time, effort, and energy when if we can, I mean, this is still work, don't get me wrong, but it's, you know, it's that kind of thing. And that, you know, yes, we know some people are slower to change than others, but are they always resistant? Not so sure.
No. And, you know, Michael Fullen this summer or spring actually came out with something in a paper that he had written in an article, and he said, is it really a teacher shortage or do we have a support shortage? You know, and so we feel very strongly that our role is to support teachers so that they can bring their A game. Right. And that's really done through this model.
Fantastic. Yeah, no, I think, you know, I agree with you. I think that the problem has been the, you know, really the fact that the supervision model, even when you check all those boxes of all those observations, hasn't led to impact. And it is, even when you develop trust and relationships, they're still not actors in the process. They are still being acted upon. I think those are very important. I also think, you know, from the name of your book, differentiated supervision, you know, giving one type of feedback and one doesn't work for every teacher. And so I think that's another problem that I've seen. And then also just the burnout. I've seen principals trying to, and I think Michael Fullen writes about this in an earlier book, to supervise individual teachers into, you know, improving the school is not, it's both too much work, and those principals out there who have 40 teachers, you know what I'm talking about, but then it's also, even if you do check those boxes, it's still not enough. So,
and we all chase that outcome of efficacy in teachers, but they can't find it if you're not giving authentic feedback. So that validates their practices, you know, and then they can start to develop their efficacy, which will have this self-fulfilling prophecy. They'll do more.
That's great.
Yeah. So let me, because we're talking in, you know, it's abstract for the listeners, you know, what is this model? So I want to sort of paint a picture, and then we go into details. So what I like about Anne and Kim's model, or the differentiated supervision model, is that there's 4 aspects of supervision. There are different supervisory practices, and we will go into those 4. And it's not just observing, it does include observing teachers one-on-one and giving feedback, but it also includes other things like, have you ever thought about, you know, going to PLC meetings and listening in on conversations and giving feedback there to small teams, or small teams if you don't have PLCs? You know, have you given feedback to the entire staff, you know, about trends and patterns that you've seen? So the model includes different types of practices and feedback, supervisory practices and feedback. And the other thing the model does is, rather than just observing and giving feedback on whatever you see, it is much more aligned, and it is much more of a system, in that you start with, what do we want to improve in the school? What's in our school improvement process? Or, you know, people have different names for it. New York City, CEP, comprehensive education plan, whatever the goals are for the school year should be the starting point. And that should dictate what kind of PD you're providing for teachers, right? Obviously, they need to learn the skills for the school improvement plan. And then that's what you should be observing. And so I like that it's much more aligned. So maybe we can start by talking about the 4 elements and then where that alignment comes in. Would that be okay for us to do?
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah. I mean, the model in and of itself is a bit like a newspaper, in that above the fold is about the building.
It sits on 4 quadrants. Yeah, kind of on a.
And below the fold is about the individual or the PLC. On the left side of the paper is more, you know, qualitative types of feedback, and quantitative on the right side. So element 1 really gets to the heart of the school improvement plan.
Right. Let's back up just a minute, and because I'm glad you mentioned that. But one of the things when we got started too, we want, because sometimes when it comes to supervision, people don't think about their purpose. You know, I mean, they just run out there because they've got to get all these done. We want you to start thinking about purpose. So, you know, that's why we kind of designed kind of the graphic that kind of runs throughout the book is for that reason.
Mhm.
Because, none of that top half is going to school. You've got to move a school, plus you've got to move individuals and teams. So, wow, that's a lot to take in as a leader, right? So we want to start with, okay, we got to move the whole school. So how do we do that?
Mhm.
So element one, sorry.
Element one is really all about the school improvement plan and developing look-fors and basing professional development on advancing a specific strategy that is outlined through the look-fors. And that's
Can we start with the what, just so people can picture it? So the first element is about conducting what they call general walkthroughs.
General walkthrough, and
yes.
the feedback that is provided is like a weekly letter. I write a blog, you could, write an email, but whatever it is, you're outlining the scope of where you have been going through the school improvement and how close or how far we are to the strategy, and then utilizing and articulating practices that you've seen either as absolute examples of it or close approximations to validate what we've seen.
This is what we kind of think of as universal support. So again, you've got to move, we use that analogy of the geese flying all in one direction. We know focus matters. We've learned that from Fullen and, countless others. So this is the place where you really work on that focus piece, and you're saying, okay, what does the data tell us? What are we going to go after? What are we going to collaboratively identify? And then we're going to collaboratively develop look-fors. I get like, it's when you want to see me, I'm Irish. And if you want to see me get my Irish up, it's when people they hand these things out to teachers. And first of all, it doesn't help you move. And the other thing you want to be doing is building collective efficacy. We know about that research, right? So, and it's profound. So how do we do that? By getting smarter together. So you develop these look-fors collaboratively, and that's where you kind of get focused and people start to understand. What I think happens is sometimes people are walking around, not doing walkthroughs. They call it a walkthrough, but they're really walking around because they don't have look-fors, and they don't have them defined based on this school improvement plan that we said, hey, we're going to go after teacher clarity. Okay, well, what does teacher clarity mean in our school? Because we know a lot of good things work, right? So, but we have to define it. And you can, just like kids can hit any target if you give it to them, teachers need to know what that target is.
So I'm just going to step back a second. So what you're talking about is the groundwork that needs to be laid in order to do the general walkthroughs. So
Yes.
for example, if in your school improvement plan, you've decided this year you need to focus more on formative assessment, let's say.
Right.
And let's say you're going to start by focusing on, checks for understanding, let's say, and you're going to do that by teachers circulating more, let's see, to check if students understand. So together, before you even take a step into a classroom for any type of walkthrough through classrooms, together with teachers, you're going to say, what does this checking for understanding look for? What is this circulating? What do we expect to see here? And you're going to collaboratively decide so teachers know what you're looking for, but also they know what the practice is to implement. It's not a surprise.
Right.
Yes.
And as their lateral capacity develops, their understanding develops, those look-fors are refined and they get stronger and more articulated because their knowledge grows. And so that's like something that happens. It's not something that you write at the beginning of the year with teachers and leave it. They're evolving, they're living and breathing based on their learning.
Yeah, we say they're developmental because at the beginning, you're going to look at your look-for list and like, gosh, that seems pretty, because it should seem pretty basic. And as you continue to, because this is about growth and learning together, then you're like, let's go back in there and refine that. And that's a great formative assessment for you as a principal to say, look at how our staff has grown. And I don't care the size of the staff. You can have a staff. We've done it with high school staffs. Everybody should be involved in it, and you can do it very efficiently because it's not a perfect list. It never is, even after you tinker with it, because that's how learning is,
Right. So I'm just gonna move us to the second one in a moment, but just so the first thing that it may not be part of your repertoire is the idea of having preferably one look-for, like teachers circulating, but with specific ideas of what that looks like. And within 3 weeks, you're going to try to observe everyone 5 to 10 minutes. And you're going to look for that look for, but this is not when you're giving Mrs. Smith one-on-one feedback. You're going to write, as Kim said, an email, a blog, something larger, obviously not naming names, but highlighting what you saw that exemplifies this practice to the entire staff. Do I have that wrong? And yeah.
Well, you could name names. I mean, this isn't
Oh,
about,
okay.
I mean, depending on, I think that depends on how long you've been in the school, the culture of the school. I mean, this isn't, if Mrs. Smith is doing something that's so amazing, Mrs. Smith should be recognized for that.
Sure, yeah.
Mrs. Jones should walk down the hall and see it. I mean, we gotta get like
on the exemplary side, on the exemplary side. Yeah.
And what you're putting in the general walkthrough feedback, which is really important, and people don't do this. They do the sticky note at the end. They says they've done it.
Right.
You've got to help people see. This is your opportunity as a leader to teach and say, this week I went and saw it, and this is what this matches our look for or look fors, depending on how complex they are. And this is why this is good. Way to go. Keep it up. It's that. So, let's not get hung up on, I just think we get hung up on that. And I think that brings in that evaluation mentality, and we want it more of a supervision.
This is formative. Yeah. So it's qualitative, it's formative. And the idea is that it's one email or message to the entire group. That is the endpoint. It's a narrow focus, that narrow look for or two.
Right.
And it also is not just to let the teachers know, but for you to keep your fingers on the pulse of how are the goals that we set? How are they going? Okay, I'm going to move to element 2 because we can't get into all the details. I don't even think we're going to do 4 today. So the second element is when it has 2 practices, and a lot of leaders are going to hold on to your seats. It's encouraging leaders to actually go and participate in PLC meetings or teacher team meetings. And then 2, conduct a focused walkthrough with feedback, this time to teams and individuals. So do you want to say a little bit more about element 2?
Well, this is really the power of the whole model. It's the driver that really makes a huge difference. So if nothing else, friends, try to get this going for a couple different reasons. Yeah, you want to try to at least attend one PLC with your team because you want to learn. Remember, we talked a little bit earlier about authenticity and agency. And if you are seeing learning along with teachers and they see you as a learner as well, then your trust and authenticity and reliability go up with them. So when you do go give them feedback, you know what you're talking about. I always said we don't have to know every content. I was in the secondary level too, but I do need to know what instruction is, and I need to count on you to be the expert in content. So let's talk about how you can apply your expertise, and that really happens well within that PLC where I know my role, they know their role, and it's collaborative. It's not me, the sage on the stage. This is a conversation. And then when you get that learning going, then you know what to say to them and can really individualize that when you go in their classroom, and you can see, because a PLC isn't a meeting where you're talking about this, that, or whatever. It's supposed to be about learning. And so what evidence do we see in your classroom of your learning? And then I get to really be individualized, and I get to help you, and you get to participate in that because it is a formative piece as well. This is about your learning, and this is about me validating your learning and supporting you.
And this is where you can differentiate a lot, because as you know, anybody out there, some teams are amazing and some are like, oh my goodness, how are we going to move them? So you as a leader are going to have, you get to then, on the team that's functioning at a high level with high impact, you are definitely just along the side. You might act more like an activator for the team that is not, found their rhythm yet. And how does a team get better without some support and feedback? So it might seem like a big time, but it's actually where you really, this is what kind of leverages everything for you. Because if you just do element 1, which we believe in with, wholeheartedly, but I've seen a lot of element 1 business without the look fors, and even sometimes with the look for, and when you don't couple it with element 2, you're going to stay a bit superficial, and it's going to seem too generic to be meaningful for me in my classroom.
Right.
I think, yeah, I agree with you about how important the second element is. And for principals who are rolling their eyes about the idea of possibly going in once a week to join the ninth grade team meeting or the social studies department or whatever it is, think about it. There's two ways that really won me over. First of all, it's where teacher learning happens, is in teacher teams, right? It's less likely going to happen in the large PD after school. It's less likely that a teacher sitting there by themselves is going to, the real growth happens in teacher teams. So imagine if you're the teacher's coach, right? Then are you going to, all the learning and the figuring out, right? And teach your team, oh, you tried this strategy. Oh, I did too. And I did it this way. And I was successful. Oh, you were, I wasn't successful. You're going to miss that. That's where the coach should be. And so if, as I believe Anne said at the beginning, if the whole purpose is to improve the school, improve teaching and learning, and teacher improvement is happening in PLCs, then you got to join them. And that's also where they're making their action plan. So they're saying, okay, the school's focusing on checking for understanding. Well, at the second grade level, this is what it's going to look like. And this week we're going to try A, B, and C, right? And so then you're there. So now you know that you're going to go into classes and you're going to look for A, B, and C. Otherwise, what happens in a PLC? Teachers talk. They try things in their classrooms, and as skilled as teachers are, they're bringing back, bits and pieces. But to have eyes and ears from a school leader who can say, this is what I saw, you said, and then to give that feedback back and share the themes and the patterns with the PLCs, right? Okay, so you're trying to work on checking for understanding. I saw several exemplary examples of this in some areas where maybe next time focus a little bit more on this or that.
So exactly. And I mean, and there's just such a comfort in the group, and there's so much trust, and then learning from one another. Which also builds that, builds individual efficacy, and then efficacy, that collective efficacy within the team.
It's really hard to try something new, and teaching is a complex endeavor. And, I just had to go play pickleball last Monday with all these people.
I love pickleball.
I do too. I'm terrible at it. And I don't play very much. So I played with all these three people. I was a fill-in, a sub, and they were so much better than me. And I got better as it went on, but it was also super intimidating. And I remembered, I left at that. That's what, when you're a teacher trying something different, the vulnerability it's just how, it's just, and so, that's when they need support. Now I was lucky. The women I played with were really nice, and they supported me and gave me some good tips, and I'll go back, but this goes back to my comments too about that resistance. We say, oh, they don't try it. Well, they do probably try it. And then it's not, we don't know it. We don't support them. We don't give them some good nudges. We don't say at a girl, at a boy, we don't do that. And so then of course you drop it because it's uncomfortable. And so I think that's why this piece is just, we'd say you live mostly on this side of the quadrants. If you guys had the book, I'm doing a lot of motions with my hands, and this is audio, but I think that's the other key. And that's why this thing, and I think the other thing is it's going to put joy back in the work for you as an administrator.
It does. And
if you like teaching and learning.
And the culture really is impacted, teacher absenteeism drops. They just feel like they're part of the solution.
And they're heard and they're seen. I mean, everybody wants to be heard and seen, don't we? I mean,
no small things. Yeah. So your model does help with some other issues that schools are struggling with right now, retention, burnout, those sorts of things, right? Because schools, leaders, teachers, everyone's working hard, but I think this helps you work a little bit more smart. I don't know if that's grammatically correct. Smart. So, you may have teacher teams meeting once, twice a week, and they feel like we're meeting, but they're not focusing on that impact. And so I think that your model does that. And we know John Hattie on collective teacher efficacy is huge in terms of leading to impact. Okay, so those are some qualitative forms of feedback that we give to teachers individually, in teams, and as a school. And then, we'll focus mostly on element 3. We're running out of time, but so element 3, we move to the quantitative. And I like this because sometimes as leaders, we focus more on we're more comfortable with the qualitative. And the quantitative doesn't have to be super complex. We're not talking about complex Excel documents. No, we're just talking about, so if you're looking for, let's say, teacher circulation, and you're looking for certain practices that show that the teacher is circulating effectively. So literally popping in and seeing of 30 teachers, okay, if 15 of them were circulating effectively, then that's 50%. And so just really looking for the numbers there. So I don't know, can you talk a little bit more to that? Yeah.
Well, I just think that it builds upon this idea of transparency in leadership, which also, provides a lot of trust in your culture. And so here we don't say who was in the 50% and who isn't. It's just a number that we are sharing so that you can kind of get this social norming so we can get to 80% to really start making the impact for the whole building.
And the other thing it does for you, again, it's kind of an assessment for you as the leader. I remember working with one principal and they were trying to use rubrics at the time, and every teacher had a rubric, but they were on things that just didn't even, it was, you colored it. It was just on things that were kind of inane. And she's like, oh my gosh, if I wouldn't have looked at my look fors in their entirety, I wouldn't know where to go next, because I would be thinking, oh my gosh, yep, we implemented rubrics. Well, we didn't implement it in the way that we kind of looking at some of our other look for. So it helps you as a leader. It's that litmus test. If we go back to our, we like the analogy of a garden, we live in corn country. So we want the corn knee high by 4th of July. That's kind of one of our things that we do a dipstick measure to see where are we? And then it helps you as a leader, because I think relevant and authentic PD is one of the hardest things you do, to try to get that right, to give them what they need when they need it.
Right.
And this is one of the things that can help you do that. Oh, well, they understand that, but they don't understand this. So what we've got to go into next, still within our focus, is this. This is how you start to, slowly get implementation that you want, that's deep, that's matter, that's impactful. And that's why this one's important. Now, we don't do this one very often. As you can see, we said, 6 to 8 weeks, you might do 2, maybe 3 in a year, depending on, this is you gauge that, but you do then provide that information back to your staff for transparency, for them to say, why are we not seeing this, or what's really working for this? And where do you think we should head next? What is it that we need to do now? We've got a lot of checking for understanding with you circulating, but how are we doing with this kind of asking kids good questions, cues, or prompts? Those are, and then again, it becomes more organic and authentic.
Yeah. And I think, Anne, you bring up another point, which is another benefit both to leaders and also to teachers, going back to the burnout, right? The worst thing for teachers is when principals are like, okay, we're going to try this new initiative. Now we're going to try this new initiative. Now we're going to try. And like you said, right, oh yeah, we did rubrics. Now we're moving on. But what happens is when you don't quantify the progress in implementation, we're not even talking about student debt, just in implementation, you might be abandoning a practice too soon, right? So you try the rubrics, right? And if you really go through the classes and you look at who is implementing the rubrics well, based on the criteria we all outlined, only 10% are using it well. So historically, we would say, okay, we tried rubrics, student achievement isn't moving, let's move on to the next thing. And that drives everyone batty. You're exhausted, your teachers are exhausted. So instead say, okay, let's implement rubrics. Let's figure out what it is we need to see in each classroom. And let's wait until we get to 75, 90% implementation to see, is this impacting student data before we abandon it?
Well
it's you really nailed that one. It's a really important piece. I have tons of examples of this. Principals are like, oh my gosh, they were using learning targets, but the kids couldn't express it. So it didn't, there's just, because, so this kind of keeps everybody in, I don't want to say in check, but everybody honest. And then you stay as long as you need to with this certain thing, and then it helps you go deeper, because I think that's the other thing that happens is you want to start to get more depth.
And we won't go into it, but in the book they don't just, a leader doesn't just say, okay, I saw 15 out of 13 classrooms are implementing rubrics correctly, there's a long process where with the staff, you go through and you look at the data and you examine it, and you also bring in student achievement data, because obviously the point of rubrics, walkthroughs, well, whatever teacher practice is not for its own sake, but it's to improve student learning. So there's a whole process which you can look at in the book, but I think the most important part of this element is that it inculcates an evaluative mindset in everybody. We don't just implement something to implement it, but we're asking constantly, is it working? How well is it working? What should we do differently? So
what should we do differently?
Right. And it answers Hattie's question. Know thy impact. What is it that you're doing? And it's a method to do that.
Yeah. So I do. I think this, go ahead. Yeah. Sorry.
I mean, I know we're not going to have time to go to 4, but the nice thing about even that piece of quantitative feedback is that you get to use everything. And so you have all this rich data from the whole year, from all the times that you've spent with your teachers, to really give an authentic, summative conversation or evaluation. It just gives so much more authenticity to that.
I don't know if leaders even think of it that way, but I like that your model really points out that you're looking for qualitative and quantitative data for yourself to understand the progress of the school, and for your teachers, for them to understand where they are. In the same way, a teacher wouldn't just give quantitative feedback to a student, right? That makes sense for teachers to students. So now why doesn't that make sense for us as leaders to do with our teachers, to provide both the quantitative and qualitative?
That's exactly right, Jen.
And I think one thing I would just say about element 4 is that we know you live in a system that you may or may not have your own agency to change the rubric they're using or whatever. So we understand.
Well, why don't you share what element 4 is if you're going to talk about it?
Okay, so element 4 basically is kind of what you would typically think of, that individual supervision that most districts, have outlined. Here's the rubric, you need to observe them X amount of times. It's kind of a big observation that, it's more of a full lesson observation, kind of just think more traditional.
For the goal of end of year evaluation.
Right.
Clarify.
Summative.
Yeah.
And, as much as we both thought, like, let's blow it all up, and we'd still like to do that in maybe the next slide. You live within a system, and we want you to, and you need to be employed by that system. So, I think this is a way to make that process, which, our job isn't to go into the good or bad with what those currently look like, but then how to navigate it so that's more meaningful. And you have so much information. By the time you come to that, it becomes really much more of a, you still have to fill out whatever form your district has given you, but it becomes a more authentic conversation and a lot more reflection on both parties. You as the principal say, my goodness, look at the beginning of the year, we saw this and now it's here, and for the teacher. So it's a way to, and then it connects, we connect it with the other 4 elements.
Great. Okay. So I think we will leave it there to make sure that we are respectful of your time and our listeners. Is there anything that absolutely has to be said about the model and before we end?
Well, I would only say, as a practicing principal myself, this can be done, and it does have a tremendous impact. I mean, in the 4 years I've been at my current building, we've grown achievement by 40%. So it does make a difference by practicing this, and as intimidating as it could be, don't give up the ship. It can be done.
And we gave tools. Like Jen and we talked, I don't know if that's going to make it, but we are all 3 of us practitioners. And so we gave tools and ways to create that kind of infrastructure so that you can do it, because we understand that it, especially just listening to this, it might seem overwhelming. But I think once you can get yourself organized, it becomes a way to do your work and can have a lot of impact, which is why we're all doing this.
Fantastic. Thank you. And if our listeners would like to learn more about you or your work, where should we send them?
Well, I certainly will be available on email and not Twitter X, but Twitter. I'm still not transitioning. At Kim, KIMMKAZ. And then via email.
And I have a website, annmasbach.com. Kim and I both are kind of using that right now. So that's pretty easy, except my last name's a little hard to spell. And then I'm also on Twitter and email.
Great. And Corwin will get you to us as well. If you
we were
go
published
to
by Corwin.
Fantastic.
We'd love to hear from you. And thank you, Jen. I mean, we're thrilled that you read
honored.
it. We're just thrilled.
Wow.
So
Such a big deal.
Thank you. Thank you so much. Well, first of all, thank you for this book. I think it's a great addition. You really provide a lot of very concrete practices that school leaders, we're doing this in the summer so that leaders can try to implement some of them this coming year. And I really appreciate the practicality of the book and the usefulness at this time. So thank you to both of you. And thank you for this time to talk with me again. Sorry, Mike couldn't be here. But great book, everyone. It's Differentiated Supervision, Growing Teachers and Getting Results. Ann Masbach, Kim Morrison, thank you again.
Thanks for listening to this episode of the School Leadership Show, a podcast for aspiring and practicing school leaders. Send your comments, questions, and show ideas to me, Mike, at schoolleadershipshow.com. And please consider rating the podcast in iTunes and leaving a comment. And definitely pass the show along to your colleagues.